We are joined now by the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp. Governor Kemp, appreciate you getting up early and joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be on with you.
Okay, so I want to start here. How did you become aware that Major League Baseball was pulling the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and what were your first thoughts when you officially saw the news?
Well, the commissioner actually called to let me know, and I told him that he was making a big mistake, and he was going to regret this decision. You know, I had reached out to them a few days before that to make sure they knew what was actually in the bill and not what people like the President of the United States and Stacey Abrams were saying that was a bunch of lies. And, he told me then, he said, we're just getting a lot of pressure. And I said, I understand, but you need to make sure you understand what's in the bill, because this is not restrictive. We're adding opportunities for people to vote, especially on the weekends in Georgia, and making a lot of mechanical fixes to the elections process, which some of them were actually called for by the County Commissioners Association here in Georgia, and things that the legislature was working on and other things. And it's just, it's a terrible decision, I think, for them. They are now officially part of the woke cancel culture, and it's gonna be a bad decision, I believe, for Major League Baseball. And I just hate it for the Atlanta Braves because they did not support this decision.
So when he called you and told you that they had made the decision, what was he basing that decision on, given that you had walked him through the bill's particulars? And to my knowledge, even the Democrats in the state of Georgia were not asking for Major League Baseball to pull the All-Star game out of Atlanta.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into a private conversation I have with the commissioner. I appreciate him, having the nerve to call me and let him know what they were doing. But it was never about the specifics in the bill. And none of these comments by Delta, Coca-Cola, or Major League Baseball have cited one specific piece in the legislation, which is what's so frustrating. And the American people and the citizens of Georgia need to know that someone's lying to them here, and it's not me. I mean, when Joe Biden gets a 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post, it must be really egregious what he was saying, and it was. And, their Major League Baseball succumbed to the pressure of a bunch of activists in these organizations that Stacey Abrams is running, and pressure from the White House. And, I hate to have to call that out, but that's exactly what has happened. It is a cancel culture that's politically motivated, quite honestly, for them to pass H.R. 1 or S.R. 1 that's an unconstitutional mandate or takeover of federalizing elections versus letting the states do this. And I've been very clear on this issue for over a decade. When I was Secretary of State of Georgia, I always supported our state having the ability to do what our legislature and our laws thought was best to have secure, accessible, fair elections. But also I supported the rights of states like California and Oregon that were doing things that I completely thought was a bad idea, to especially have secure elections. But, that was their constitutional right. But that doesn't matter to this crowd anymore. The truth doesn't matter, nor does the Constitution.
I'm going to read you a quote, and this is from Joe Biden's interview a couple of days before Major League Baseball made their decision with ESPN, and I'm reading direct quote from the president. "You're going to close a polling place at 5 o'clock when working people just get off. This is all about keeping working folks and ordinary folks that I grew up with from being able to vote." So he said they're closing polling places at 5. That is a flat out lie, as the polls are open much longer than that. And what do you think about a statement like that?
Yeah, you said it. It is a lie. Obviously, he should be firing people on the staff for not giving them the note card that actually explain what the bill did, or telling them to focus on something else besides Georgia's election law when he doesn't know what he's talking about. If you look at his own state of Delaware, our laws in Georgia are much more accessible, especially when you compare early voting opportunities. We have 17 days that people can vote early in the state of Georgia, and this legislation actually added a mandatory Saturday for all 159 counties, and then gave all 159 counties 2 optional Sundays if the county wants to, that they can hold early voting. I mean, you compare that to Delaware, it's not even close. And what's so ironic about this is with Major League Baseball headquartered in New York, Delta's flying into New York, Coca-Cola's selling drinks in New York. In New York, you have to have an excuse to vote an absentee ballot. In Georgia, you do not. In New York, you have 10 days of early voting. In Georgia, you have at least 17. And all of these companies and organizations are wanting to play baseball or sell products in places like Cuba and China that don't have elections. And if they do, they're rigged. And they're not saying a damn thing about that, which is just what makes this so hypocritical. And you know what's sad? It's sad for baseball fans. It's sad for kids right now that was like I was, that played Little League baseball, played in high school, love the game. Today it's sad for them. And then it's sad for the small business owners and the community up in Cobb County and the metro Atlanta area in our state. Our small business people are getting screwed because people are lying and pressuring people for political reasons. It's sick. I mean, it's the straw that is going to break the camel's back on this. I mean, it is just, people are outraged from both parties. I mean, even the Democrats are coming out and saying, even if they may disagree with some parts of the law or the law in general, they certainly don't think this boycott should be going on. It's outrageous.
Talking to Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, I saw an independent study that said pulling the All-Star game was potentially going to cost the greater Atlanta area $100 million. Now, I'm sure there's debates about exactly what the cost of it is. There is no debate that there will be less money in the economy than there would be if the game were taking place. Given how diverse the Atlanta area community is, it's actually likely that Major League Baseball has pulled a sport from one of the most diverse cities in America and is going to move it to a much less diverse city, thereby taking away money that would have otherwise gone to help many different people of many different backgrounds. To me, that's a big story.
Yeah, it's a huge story. I mean, and again, people are just getting the short end of the stick here in Georgia. But the thing is, what's going to happen with the long-term implications of this? I mean, what's going to happen when, the Braves hopefully make the playoffs? What are they going to do then? I mean, what's Major League Baseball going to do when the Braves go to play in New York? They're going to be playing in a state that has more restrictive early voting laws than our own state does. I mean, it's just insane that this is going on.
It's interesting you mentioned New York because that's where Major League Baseball is based, and they've never said a word about voting requirements in the state of New York. And you also mentioned the state of Delaware, where Joe Biden has been representing that state for decades, and he's never mentioned anything about voting issues, even though both of those states are more restrictive than what the law is right now in Georgia. In general, this is where the media should do its job and point out the truth of these stories as opposed to just running with salacious accusations. How would you assess the media's role in creating the mob that led to the All-Star game being pulled from Atlanta?
Oh, many of them are partners with the mob. I mean, if you look at some of the things that the New York Times and, a lot of the mainstream, network television, what their anchors are saying and other things. Thankfully, there's been great pieces like the Wall Street Journal, people like you that normally don't cover politics that are just like, this is so egregious that it's worth noting because it's going to transform sports, in my opinion. What is next? Are they going to, go after college football? Are they going to go after, tournaments, maybe youth tournaments that are coming to Atlanta and try to get those to boycott our state as well? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I tell you what, Major League Baseball has done. They have subjected themselves to be criticized every game that's played all across the country when you start comparing, one state's voter laws to others. And there's going to be plenty of them that they're playing in that are more restrictive than what we have, especially when it comes to early voting days.
What do you think about calls to boycott the Masters that are currently circulating, given the Masters starts on Thursday? And credit to the Masters, I think they're just going to thumb their nose at any of these criticisms, and their business model is strong enough that they can do so. but it speaks to your suggestion that this thing is just going to grow in terms of the pressure. You also mentioned college football. I know the SEC championship game has been in Atlanta for 20 some odd years. How would you assess the Masters and other major sporting events in your state, given what Major League Baseball has done?
Well, I think Major League Baseball is going to find out that whatever they have done, it's not going to be good enough for the cancel culture, because they're going to have some other ask now. They'll want, and when they get it, they're going to want something else. And I think, there's a lot of organizations out there, and I won't get into specifics, but they know this. But there's also organizations out there that are supporting these type events and supporting the great business climate that we have in Georgia that know the truth. They know that the Delta Government Affairs team and the Coca-Cola Government Affairs team and many other companies were involved in this process. They worked to make the legislation better before the final bill was passed. And that's why they're taking, very benign stances on this, obviously supporting voting rights and making sure that it's easy to vote but hard to cheat, but not getting canceled and waiving the pressure. And that's the thing about Major League Baseball. It was never about what was in the law. It was about, and same with Delta and Coca-Cola, it was about how much political pressure they were getting that they could not stand up and actually tell these activists or activist board members or other individuals from high-profile people that were protesting them, some big corporate CEOs and some former CEOs that's basically pressuring these companies when they live in New York and New Jersey themselves that have more restrictive laws than we do. I mean, it's just, it just does not add up. But I think the Masters, listen, it didn't matter if Georgia had a Democratic governor or Republican governor. The Masters just doesn't get involved in politics. Sports shouldn't be political. And I don't think you'll see the Masters doing that. They had the women's amateur there last week. It went great. We've got a lot of great sporting events coming up. And I can tell you, I'm going to continue to be very aggressive to call these people out and make sure that people know what the truth is. Because if people look at the truth and actually compare what is in our law and what this bill is doing as far as adding accessibility, but also making sure we have secure elections, I don't think we're going to have any issues.
We're talking to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. When you look, Governor, you mentioned Delta, Coke, Major League Baseball. Why do you think all of these companies are so quick to bend the knee to a small number of people? Because let's be honest, it's a small number of people that are demanding boycotts as opposed to just ignoring them and doing what's in the best interest of their business, which is not making radical, ridiculous decisions like occurred with Major League Baseball pulling the All-Star game out of Atlanta.
That's probably a question I can't answer. Like a lot of your listeners, I grew up just being a guy that loves sports. I played high school football and baseball. Went to work when I graduated from, I worked for a construction company when I was at the University of Georgia, graduated, went to work for those guys, started my own company in 93, and I've been hard working ever since. And I don't think most people can really even comprehend why somebody would cave to this kind of pressure. And I'm a CEO myself. I've been signing the front of my own paycheck for over 35 years now and still doing that today in some regards. But I've never been a CEO of a publicly traded company, so I don't really know what kind of pressure they're getting. But I can just tell you that whatever it is, it's not going to be worth it at the end of the day when they're not following truth and facts, because I believe that truth and facts matter, and that at the end of the day, that's going to win the day. And there's one thing for sure, as I said earlier, somebody's lying to you here. It's either the president, Stacey Abrams, or me. And I can assure you, it is not me.
Stacey Abrams lost to you in 2018 by, I believe, 50,000 votes. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. She refused to concede. She said the election was rigged, and she has become a star of the Democratic Party. Why is it okay for a Democrat to say that an election is rigged and refuse to concede and they become a hero? But when Donald Trump did it, people said that guy can't even speak to anybody on social media anymore. That's got to be interesting from your perspective because you were right in the middle of it in 2018 in your own gubernatorial race, and then you were in the middle of it in 2020 during the presidential election. And I would imagine you saw a pretty different media treatment for Stacey Abrams compared to Donald Trump and other people who were involved in the Georgia election.
Well, a couple of points here. I mean, people need to realize Stacey Abrams is making millions off of this whole scam she's got going on of pressuring people and getting these big donors to support all these different organizations. You don't even know how many they are, and how many that she's profiting from. And it's not just her. There's a lot of other people that are doing this too. It is the biggest racket in America right now. And regardless of all that, the fact is, after the 2000 election, it was the Democrats saying that we needed reforms in Georgia. One of the state senators I know very well, it's a Republican, spoke to this fact of why he was supporting the bill, and he was actually quoting one of his Democratic colleagues that had said the exact same thing in 2019, and he just said, I wish we had acted on this when this senator was actually calling for it a year earlier, when they're doing it now. So it's just, it's political expedient for them right now. And I think what happened, if you look, the domain name Jim Crow 2.0 was reserved weeks before the final version of the bill passed, and I signed it. And I think the Democrats and the activists actually thought we were going to be restricting voting and suppressing the vote, in their words, and other things. And what happened was we did not. We expanded the opportunity for people to vote, fixed a lot of mechanical problems that we saw in the election, and made things that maybe weren't as secure as they could be more secure, but also without hurting the process or alienating anyone. And I think they were caught off guard on that because their playbook was already built. The fact is they just don't have the truth now to back them up. The truth is actually backing us up, and I think as more and more people become outraged and really learn what the truth is, because I don't tell people, look, don't just believe me. Read the bill. Look at people that are putting honest evaluations out on what the bill actually says and does and why the recommendations were made. And if people don't have that they'll just reach out to the Georgia governor's office. We can send it to them. We can send them media reports that are pointing to all of this and fact-checking it because the facts are on our side.
It's interesting. The New York Times said that your new bill was unlikely to change Georgia election turnout when they dove into the particulars, right? And yet you have this idea that suddenly there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people that don't have the ability to vote. And by the way, speaking of the Braves, I tweeted this out. I mean, in order to go to an Atlanta Braves baseball game, you have to have an ID, a picture ID, to pick up tickets at the will call window. You certainly can't get a beer without an ID. When did it become wildly controversial that you need to have an ID to be able to vote?
Well, and that's the thing. We've been using this is nothing new in Georgia. We have been using the photo ID requirement here in our state since the mid 2000s, rather. Minority participation has increased over the years, even with the photo ID requirement. So it's almost condescending to my friends in the minority communities that they for some reason don't have the ability to get a photo ID. And in Georgia, what's even more insane, if you don't have one, we'll give you one for free. And there's ways, if you don't have the ID, that you can still request an absentee ballot. So it's not like, we're alienating anybody from this provision. 97% of the people have already been voting in our state, or certainly 95 in person before, and they have been using the photo ID requirement, which we had on in-person voting. But because we had a 351% increase in absentee ballots by mail, we had to find a better way to process those at the county level than to do a antiquated, arbitrary signature match process. And by simply using your driver's license number, last 4 of your social, and other things, we can do that better, more secure, but also more efficient, which will help us report election results quicker.
We're talking to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Last question for you. The Atlanta Braves obviously were very upset by this decision. You rarely see a statement publicly like the one that they made. What have your conversations been like with the Braves, and where do they go from here as it pertains to their relationship with Major League Baseball and with potentially getting the All-Star game and potentially brought back to Atlanta in years ahead?
Well, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Like I said, I hate it for the Braves. I mean, I've had people reach out to me saying we're canceling our season tickets, and I've told them, look, don't take this out on the Braves. They are not in support of this decision. In my opinion, they're as upset as I am about this. But a lot of those folks have said, I don't care. It's guilt by association. I'm taking it out on Major League Baseball. And that's what's so terrible about Major League Baseball's decision.
I know I said last question, but what would you tell those people? There's a ton of people listening to me right now in all 50 states that are fed up with this woke virus infiltrating the world of sports and a decision being made by Major League Baseball to pull their All-Star game over what I think is a lot of hot air in the grand scheme of things, as you've laid out during the course of this interview. What would you tell those people to do? Big, diehard Major League Baseball fans that are just fed up with the decision of Rob Manfred and other sports leagues. This is like kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, as you said a little bit earlier. What would you tell those people to do?
I'd say go Braves. We got to remember those small business owners that are at the Battery and, supporting those folks that work at the stadium. And we got to protect our own here. I would just tell them to continue to support the Atlanta Braves. I'm certainly going to do so.
Governor, I appreciate the time. I know how busy you are. I look forward to being able to go down to a game myself, and feel bad for Braves fans that they're not going to be able to go to that All-Star game.
Hey, thanks for having me on.